The following program contains shocking challenges to Republicans. If you suffer from blind party loyalty, this show might not be right for you. Check with the Tea Party leader.
Proclaiming the truth in the highways and byways of the world. Fighting for justice in the dark alleys of politics. Raising the voice of resistance to a fevered pitch. Men enough to walk his cat. Randall Terry.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Voice of Resistance. It is I, your voice, and your servant, Randall. All right, maybe I'm not your voice, but at least I've got my own television show you can listen. Today, we have part 3 of our exclusive interview with former Senator Rick Santorum, who is now on a quest for the White House. And an interview with Steve Deace. You are not going to want to miss it. This man has his head screwed on right, and it is thrilling for me to hear what he has to say about the religious right. You're going to like it. Today's program brought to you in part by angry white males who don't like other people's pagan religions. Yeah, that's right. And by angry black men who don't like angry white men. Yeah, you got it. I'll be right back after a quick word from a very convoluted soul, Sir Reginald Bling.
Just turn the thing on. I got something to say. I saw President Obama give his State of the Union address, and what did he say? I couldn't even tell. One minute he's for private enterprise, the next minute he's for socialism. He changed and mixes, matches stuff more than Pippi Longstockings mix and matches her socks. President Obama, make up your mind. You sit on that fence too long, it's bound to hurt you.
Welcome to the broadcast, friend. Rick Santorum, former senator from Pennsylvania, now contender for the GOP nomination for the White House. I caught up with him in Iowa, and in case you missed it, this is part 3 in a 3-part interview with him. You can watch the others online at randallterry.com. In today's interview, I asked him some very straightforward questions about his commitment to the pro-life cause. When he is done with this interview, I'm going to make a couple of comments. Judge for yourself.
Let's talk about the killing of children by abortion. The president has enormous powers right now with executive orders. It's frightening, frankly, what some of the things the president could do. As president, what would you do to stop the killing of children, to make it a criminal act to kill a child from conception until birth?
Well, I've always supported whether it's called a personhood amendment or an amendment that would outlaw abortion. I think life begins at conception. It's a biological fact. The question is, does the Constitution recognize that person as a person under the 14th Amendment? And
Horton, here's a who.
Yeah, that's right. And that it's no matter how small that no matter how small that child is in the womb, it is still a living human being. And so we have decided. The courts have decided, we haven't, the courts have decided that that person doesn't qualify as a person under the Constitution, and I think that's wrong. I think it needs to be fixed, and we can do so. Obviously, we can promote it and talk about it, and we can also appoint Supreme Court justices who will rule consistently with that.
If a bill crossed your desk that made it a criminal act federally in all 50 states to kill an unborn baby, would you sign it?
Yeah, I said I would criminalize the act of a doctor performing an abortion. Yes.
Women going to jail?
No, I'm not. I wouldn't support criminalizing the act on the part of women who have abortion. It's the abortion provider who should suffer the criminal penalties.
The last question: the pro-life movement is your natural base. Obviously, they should be your hardest core.
You know my history.
Yeah, you got in a little bit of trouble with the endorsement of Specter and the endorsement of Christy Todd Whitman.
Well, remember, Christy Todd Whitman, when I endorsed her, was running against Jim McGreevey. I don't know if people remember that.
I do.
Yeah, I mean, so.
But a devil's a devil.
Well, but yeah, but they're
Republican devil can cut your throat because she's in the camp with you.
All I would say is that Jim McGreevey, as we all found out, was far worse than Christy Todd Whitman, and so they were both bad on all of the social issues, horrible, and I would argue McGreevey even worse. But there are other issues too, and I campaigned for her not on the abortionist. I campaigned for her because she would cut taxes and she would have a pro-growth agenda.
Do you regret endorsing and campaigning for either of them?
I don't regret Christy Whitman because she was better than McGreevey. I mean, let's talk about Jim McGreevey. The guy got thrown out once he did get elected, and we all know his story. With respect to Specter, look, I endorsed Arlen Specter for a very practical reason. Arlen was we were at a 51-49 majority. We had at least 2, and I thought 3 Supreme Court nominees coming up under the next Bush administration, and those nominees would be conservative seats, Rehnquist and O'Connor, and we thought, potentially one other that we could actually pick up, whether it was Stevens or Souter that was being rumored to retire. And so for me, it was critical for us to have in place a majority that could confirm conservative justices that President Bush put up. And when Arlen came to me and said, I need you to, down the stretch, I need you to help and get out there and help me, I said, I'll do it, but here's the proviso. You have to support President Bush's nominees as chairman of the Judiciary Committee, because I knew, and it turned out to be the case, but I think every court watcher will tell you that Arlen Specter is the linchpin. He was the guy that could get conservative Republicans and moderate Democrats to vote for a nominee. That if he approved, because he was the guy that borked, if he approved, that nominee would pass. And Specter said, as long as I'm consulted, which I said fine, I checked with the White House, he said, I'll support the nominees. And he did. He went out and supported Roberts, and more importantly, I think I can say this without fear of contradiction, but for Arlen Specter, Justice Alito would not be on the court today. And so, did I make a deal? Yes, I made a deal. I made a deal for what I thought was more important, which is having 30 years of Supreme Court justices who are conservative, who would uphold the right to life, would uphold the original interpretation of the Constitution, and I'd live with 6 years of Arlen Specter.
Thank you for your time. Good luck.
Thank you, Randall.
Well, is it compassion to not prosecute a woman who deliberately pays to have her unborn baby killed? First of all, I agree wholeheartedly with Senator Santorum that abortionists, those who receive a bribe, money, to strike down an innocent person, to kill them, the unborn child, they should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. However, should there be no criminal penalties whatsoever for the woman? If a mother of a newborn baby slaps her child, beats her child, yanks her child, and breaks a limb, should that woman face any criminal sanction? You probably say yes. Well, if she kills her baby, she should face none. If a woman sells drugs or buys drugs or sells herself as a prostitute, should there be no criminal sanction? But she can kill her baby without one? The reason that we have law is because, well, primarily it's a deterrent. The presence of law is a sword hanging over someone's head. If you do this bad behavior, you will face this punishment. And so, if the abortionist fears being prosecuted, that's a good thing. But if the woman doesn't, then she has no internal deterrent. She doesn't fear getting arrested by the police. She doesn't fear being in a lineup. She doesn't fear her picture being in the paper. She doesn't fear criminal prosecution because she participated in the death of her baby. Now, I'm also a realist. The truth of the matter is we must make child killing illegal again. We have to restore the full protection of the law to the unborn. When that happens, the far greater penalty of law is going to crash in on the abortionist. But there's got to be something for the mother. Something that says, you as an individual are responsible for your actions. And if you try and pay someone to kill your baby, you too are guilty. Oh, well, what if they're pressured? Well, obviously, There's mitigating circumstances. A woman who is a prostitute by force, a sex slave, and they're here in America, they're all over the Pacific Rim, that woman is not going to be tried for prostitution because she's being coerced. So obviously there will be situations, as there were in the past, where a woman is the second victim, where she is coerced, or worse, forced against her will to kill her baby. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the value of human life and the purpose of law. That a woman in her right mind, and with a free will and without coercion, that if she pays another person to strike down her baby, that baby's life has inherent dignity from God and therefore deserves the full protection of law, not just against the paid, hired assassin, but against the woman in whose womb that baby resides. I know that this is not politically correct, but it's 100% consistent. And it's what the law used to be in America. If we are going to avert the just judgments of heaven, if we are going to have reparations for our national sins, we must make it illegal again to kill an innocent human being from conception until birth. When we come back from this break, I have a phenomenal interview with a man named Steve Deace from Iowa. He is a former talk show host on WHO there. He is a brilliant thinker, very articulate, and frankly, you're going to love this interview, and I am so happy to have this man saying these things. You watch, you're going to see what I mean. I'll be right back.
It's about time that drunk drivers are taken off the road. They're a real menace to those of us who text while we drive.
Moments with Moses. And for those of you that are left, I will send faintness into their hearts in the lands of their enemies. The sound of a driven leaf shall put them to flight, and they shall flee as one flees from the sword, and they shall fall when none pursues.
Welcome back to the program, friend. When I was in Iowa recently, I had the pleasure of interviewing Steve Deace, a talk show host and author of an upcoming book, We Won't Get Fooled Again. Him and his co-author have done a brilliant analysis of what went wrong with the religious right. Steve Deace.
Welcome back, friend. I'm with the almost rich and the almost famous all over this magnificent building here at the Homeschool Convention. And one of those who actually is almost rich and slightly famous, Stephen Deace. Good to see you. By the way, did I pronounce your last name right?
It's close. Deace.
Deace.
Hey, we've been spelling it wrong for centuries. Don't take any
Is
offense.
it German? Dutch? What is
You know, I don't really know. We've never. My wife's sort of a layman's genealogy expert, and she keeps trying to track this down, and we can't really find anything out. There's almost nobody that has this last name that pronounces it like this.
Somebody on Ellis Island misspelled it, is my guess.
Yes, and most people that have our last name pronounce it Deace. We're the only ones that pronounce it Deace. So, you know what? Steve is easy. Lots of people are named Steve.
All right, he's named after the proto-martyr. Let's remember that. Now, you broadcasted for years on WHO. Did I ever talk to you on the air?
I don't know. I talked to so many different people, I can't remember them all.
So do I.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, well, I'm glad to have this opportunity to interview you. And the first question I want to ask you is, why did you have me on the air?
Because I would not know how to get somebody as famous and distinguished as you, obviously. I mean, this is only the 89th largest radio market, so...
Right, I'm used to top 10 markets.
Yes, I mean, we're getting B and C list guests here, so...
Connie Chung knows me on a first-name basis. I've been with Dan Rather. Now that you say it that way, I understand, and all is forgiven. All right.
Well, based on some of the ads that you're running in our state, I'm guessing a few of them probably do know who you are right now, so...
What did you think of those ads, by the way?
I think that if I were a Republican running for president, I'd probably hate you. You're going to make my life a lot more difficult with those kinds of ads, because especially in a room like this, you have a lot of patriots in a room like this. I mean, Iowa has really an explosively growing homeschool community. Some of the most effective political activists in our state are in this room this weekend. And what you're doing is you're priming the pump for what kind of questions these other Republican candidates who would prefer to stick to the talking points and not answer these questions, you're going to make life much more difficult for them.
Right. Precision, ladies and gentlemen, the details matter. All right, Steve is coming out with a new book very shortly, him and another author, on the religious right and why, as arguably one of the most feared and largest voter blocs in the nation, we have not succeeded in one single major policy victory since Ronald Reagan to president. Think about that. You think about all of the hot button issues that are used to raise money for the religious right, and there has not been one single major policy victory in our history. And I'm speaking as an insider who has been there since the early 80s, but I want to let Steve talk because, well, you know me, friends. I use this show to beat up on these people all the time. It's a joy to have someone else beat up on them. Steve, flog away.
Well, what happened is we watched...
By the way, what's the working title of the book?
The working title of the book is Won't Get Fooled Again. Forgive us, we're fans of The Who. And we thought...
It's a great song.
The song's message about not, replacing one false leader with another, and not viewing yourself because you recognize what is wrong as morally superior to those who do not. I think it's very appropriate because I think it's actually been a mission statement for why the religious right went wrong. It really became the self-righteous right. And instead of ultimately holding a defining standard known as God's natural law that everyone is accountable to, let me just give you one practical example, Randall. Let's look at God's natural law of gravity. God's natural law of gravity doesn't just apply to liberal Democrats who wish they could fly. Okay, but even Republican right-wing conservatives...
This is breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. The law of gravity applies to everyone.
It does apply to everyone, yet we treat it as if, our movement has treated it for a generation as if only God's laws apply to the people that we are convinced are breaking them worse than we are. That they're not a universal standard, that they're not applicable across the board, and only one side has to be held accountable to them. And if the other side breaks them, well, then we make excuses for them. And I think...
one of the points you're bringing up is that the religious right has become the mistress of the Republican Party.
I think that's a great word for it. I think what's happened is, I'll use a word that rhymes with mistress, our witness. I believe our Christian witness has been compromised in this culture because the Church of Jesus Christ in America is no longer looked at in the minds of many Americans as a transcendent force for good, a place I go to get life's difficult answers. Now we are looked at as a political issue advocacy organization. And we're looked at like the unions are looked at within the Democratic Party. We are looked at as a constituency of the Republican Party. Correct. And the problem with that is it impacts the integrity of what we're trying to say. We cover for one side, yes, and then while we hold the other side accountable, and that makes it difficult for us to make the argument that being pro-life is just the right thing, not the conservative thing or the Republican thing. It is the right thing, because the reality is there is no compassion, there is no justice on this world without the law and teachings of Jesus Christ and the Word of God. They just don't exist. They're not found in the Wall Street Journal editorial page. They're not featured on Fox News at night. I mean, this is not what the EIB network has constructed its network around.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is extremism on the half shell. I'm loving this. Stay tuned for more. I'm going to, you know, Andrew, we didn't have our clock running. For the sake of the viewer, I'm going to stop here and I'm going to pick up with Steve tomorrow. We'll do a series with Stephen Dace, who is this unknown quantity from we don't know where.
Right here, God's country.
Oh, see, there you go again. Yeah. What West Virginia is not God's country?
You know what? I'm gonna follow the mode of the religious right. Wherever I am is God's country. How's that?
I love this man. We'll be back tomorrow with Stephen as we talk about the mistress. How do you spell political prostitution? Thank you, Steve.
Hey, you Republicans, get ready for real fights. Get ready for real fights. Defund Planned Parenthood. And you Democrats, we're sorry to see you go. Hope you enjoy life in the real world. You might be able to get a nice little job at Starbucks or at Walmart. Huh?
A nation without a conscience is a nation without a soul. A nation without a soul is a nation that cannot live. Sir Winston Churchill.
Welcome back to the program, friend. Allow me to speak directly to you for a moment. The religious right is arguably the largest voting bloc in the United States of America. And as Steve pointed out, we do not have any major policy victories to show for 30 years of activism, lobbying, and of course, spending exorbitant sums of money. Let me say this to you. Please hear me. You can't hire guns. In the American political process, you can't send a group money. Oh, here's hot button issue, babies, hot button issue, homosexual marriage, hot button issue, American independence, Panama Canal, Obamacare. You can't send money to so-called specialists in Washington, D.C. and expect them to solve it. One of the reasons that the religious right has failed so miserably is because our leaders have taught people, hey, we're your guy. All you have to do to have victory for Jesus and for the kingdom of God is send us money. That is a lie, and it's part of the reason why we're losing. I'll be right back with words from one of our founding fathers.
They slay the widow and the sojourner, and murder the fatherless. And they say, the Lord does not see. The God of Jacob does not perceive. Understand, O dullest of the people. Fools, when will you be wise? He who planted the ear, does he not hear? He who formed the eye, does he not see? He who chastens the nations, does he not chastise?
George Mason said, as nations cannot be rewarded or punished in the next world, they must be in this. George Mason was one of our founding fathers, and he had the courage and clarity of mind to say that nations are judged by God. They're judged by God based upon God's laws. Abraham Lincoln, another hero in the American body politic, he specifically stated that the Civil War was the judgment of God on America because of slavery. I ask you, do we have the courage and the clarity of mind to speak the truth about our own national danger right now in the presence of God? As a nation, we are betraying His laws. What judgments of His will we face?